Apologetics essay. We believe these people do excellent work in convincing hearts that it's possible to defend your faith in a way that's believable and is accountable. It's important work that they do. And they've got a conference happening from the 24th to the 26th of August. It's right here at NG Oosterlig, where they're going to help us, show us how we can play an active role in influencing the public domain. And to get this done, they've got speakers, and one of them, Dr Casey Luskin, who is a scientist and an attorney with graduate degrees in science and law and works at the Discovery Institute. So I welcome with me in studio Dr. Casey Luskin. Hello.
Thank you so much for having me.
And John Grobler as well. Hello, John.
Good morning.
John, you've brought in Dr. Casey Luskin. Why?
I brought him because some years ago I encountered some difficult questions around science. And I had some questions, and then I heard about Dr. Casey Luskin, and then I had the privilege of being part of the C.S. Lewis Summer Institute program in Seattle, Washington, that they run every year. And after doing the program and hearing the difference between the data and different interpretations of the data of science, it really opened my mind to see, but there's way more than just one narrow view, and that we must be open to understanding and learning more about science rather than just ignorantly saying, well, science says. We need to understand what we are talking about. And so the Discovery Institute, I discovered they've such a wealth of information, evidence-based, and they really seek to help people understand what is going on. And so I approached him last year already to come to South Africa because I would really like them to come and share a different point of view than what people are necessarily aware of, to say, but wait, there are smart people and there is way more than what we realize. So they've come, and particularly they're presenting intelligent design, which has been misrepresented by many people that I've come across in science, and I want them to come and tell the truth to our country so that people can hear, but this is what they are saying, and this is the truth about the Discovery Institute and intelligent design.
Informed, credible truth, in other words.
Yes.
There you go. But this begs the question, Casey. Intelligent design, how do you become fascinated with that in the first place?
Oh, that's a great question. So I started studying intelligent design when I was an undergraduate student at the University of California, San Diego. And I was taking all these courses in evolution, and they were discussing, this is from a very pro-evolution, very secular pro-evolution perspective, these courses. And they would say, well, we have all these complex features in life, and these things evolved by a very slow process of natural selection acting upon random mutation. And as a student, I would ask the question, well, where's the details of how this worked? How did all these complex features that we see in living organisms, like the eye or the brain or the heart or the circulatory system, or all of these molecular machines that we have inside of our cells, how did all these complex features evolve? And I never got any answers. And so I started to read books by other scientists who were developing an alternative theory called intelligent design. And intelligent design is basically a scientific theory which says that many features of life and the universe are best explained by an intelligent cause rather than an undirected cause like natural selection. And so the basic idea is that there's certain types of information and complexity which in our experience only come from intelligent agents. And so, for example, we see in living organisms, what is at the heart of all living organisms? We see in every single cell a DNA code, a code inside of our DNA, which is very much like computer programming, where we see in our cells this DNA code contains instructions and commands, which our cells can interpret and read and execute very much like the way that a computer will read software, where, you have all these codes and commands in a computer program, which a computer will read, interpret, and execute. Well, the same thing is going on inside of our cells. Every moment of every single day, our cells are basically doing computer-like information processing. And then what is the product of this computer-like information processing? Well, it's producing literally molecular machines. Inside of every one of your cells, Janine, is these microscopic molecular machines composed of proteins that are performing all kinds of crucial functions inside of your cells, producing energy, producing the building blocks that your body needs, carrying out, executing these instructions, disposing of waste, engaging in recycling, all kinds of important machines that are inside of your cells performing these vital functions. So we ask this question: where in our experience do things like code, computer programming code, computer-like information processing, and machines, where do these things come from? Well, in all of our experience, these sorts of things have only one known cause, and that is an intelligent agent or a mind. And so when we look at the complexity that we see in our cells, that we see in biology, that we see throughout the living world around us, these sorts of things don't come from a random chance process like Darwinian evolution. They require a mind in order for them to originate. And so this is sort of the essence of what intelligent design is getting at, that we see evidence for an intelligent mind, a creator or a designer being behind life in the universe. And so for me, this was a much more intellectually satisfying explanation for how we account for all the complexity of the world than just sort of saying it came about by blind and unguided natural processes. That was not enough, and I think intelligent design is a much better explanation.
Well, now I'm curious, because we are talking about intellectual, academic people here. We are talking about curious people who want things to make sense, the logic of it. So why is there such resistance against intelligent design when I think it just makes more sense?
That's a very, very good question. And the answer to your question is a complicated one. Let's start off with the way that sort of the sociology of science works, okay? There's a famous historian of science named Thomas Kuhn in the United States who published a book titled The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And what he said in this book is that scientists are often intolerant to new ideas that challenge the reigning paradigm. Well, today in biology and many other scientific fields, the reigning paradigm is what we call Darwinism. Okay, that's the idea that basically everything came about through an unguided process of everything in the living world, at least, came about through an unguided process of natural selection acting upon random mutation. Okay, now look, I believe that natural selection happens. I mean, it's a real force. We can see it when we see, for example, antibiotic resistant bacteria that will evolve resistance to the drugs that we're using to fight, certain infections. So this is a real thing. But the question is not, does natural selection explain some things? The question is, does natural selection explain essentially all things, or all aspects of the living world, the result of unguided natural processes like natural selection? That is sort of the core claim of Darwinism, or in the modern form, we call it neo-Darwinism, where we take into account the way that DNA works. And so the question is, what is the best explanation for these things? And so most academics today will appeal to a strictly unguided material process of Darwinian evolution to explain everything that we see in the living world. And when you start to challenge that view, they put up their guards. They don't want anything but these sort of blind and unguided evolutionary mechanisms to be the explanation. And so you come up against this sort of resistance. They don't want people who will challenge this Darwinian paradigm, because they have sort of this neat, tidy way of explaining things where it's unguided mechanisms all the way down. There's no room for intelligent intervention. There's no room for, say, if you believe that God has actively intervened in the history of life. They don't allow those sorts of explanations. They only want to allow material, unguided evolutionary explanations, and that accounts for everything. So as soon as you start to challenge that, Janine, you get this intolerance that the historian of science Thomas Kuhn talked about. You get this resistance, this sort of opposition, and unfortunately this often takes the form in what is sometimes called cancellation. I don't know if that term, if you guys have experienced much in the US where I'm from, we talk about cancellation quite a bit, where basically if somebody is promoting a view that you don't like, then you have to get rid of them. And so in the US, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of cancellation of pro-intelligent design scientists and academics, where they've been hounded out of departments, they've been denied tenure, they've been denied jobs, students have been kicked out of graduate programs, and the reason why is they're challenging this status quo, and they pose a threat to sort of this reigning paradigm in the scientific community that strictly unguided Darwinian mechanisms are explaining everything that we see. And so this is a real problem. I'm glad if you guys don't have this problem here in South Africa quite as much. That's good.
Well, maybe just not the official name for it.
Okay.
Cancelism.
Yeah, cancellation. It's definitely a problem, and what we're hoping can happen is there can be academic freedom in the scientific community where scientists are free to follow the evidence wherever it leads. And sometimes maybe it will lead to a Darwinian explanation. That's okay. But maybe in other cases, it does not lead to a Darwinian explanation. It's leading to, the complexity of life is better explained by an intelligent cause rather than just strictly standard Darwinian evolutionary explanations.
But does intelligent design imply God?
That's a very good question. So I personally am a Christian, okay? I think it's very important to state where you're coming from and just sort of be very open about those things. So I personally do believe that the designer is God, okay? But there are other folks in the intelligent design community who are not Christians. We actually have folks who are from Jewish backgrounds, from Muslim backgrounds, from Eastern religious perspectives like Hindus who like intelligent design. In fact, some of the folks I work with in the ID community would even call themselves agnostics, where they believe that there's some kind of a designer or a creator, but they're not sure who it is. And so intelligent design as a science does not commit you to a particular religious perspective. What we're saying is that there is evidence from nature for an intelligent cause. Now, there might be other arguments that we could make, say from apologetics, from theology, from philosophy, from history, from prophecy, that can then make an argument, okay, well, the best candidate for the designer is say, the God of the Bible. But those are going beyond intelligent design. Intelligent design takes a strictly scientific perspective. Let me give you an example of this, okay? Let's say we're talking about the information in our DNA that encodes a molecular machine that is running around inside your body performing all kinds of important functions, okay? So that information is a language-based code in your DNA that's helping your body to create these machines. Clearly, the best explanation for a language-based code that's encoding a machine is going to be an intelligence, okay? But that language-based code in your DNA is not necessarily saying, made by Yahweh or made by Allah or made by Buddha or made by Yoda or whoever you think the designer is. It's simply a language-based, an information-rich language-based code that is screaming out intelligent cause. It's saying, I did not come about by chance. I did not come about by unguided Darwinian mechanisms. And so we can say from that evidence that intelligent design is the best explanation, but we can't necessarily say who the designer is. So intelligent design stops short of getting into these larger religious questions. Now, again, those are important questions. I mean, who is the designer is also a very important question. But if you are talking to, say, a friend who is an atheist or a materialist, someone who believes that there's nothing other than matter and energy. And so if somebody like that sees the evidence for intelligent design, it's really going to challenge them and their atheistic paradigm to say, oh, maybe I need to reconsider whether there is, simply an unguided material process that explains everything. Maybe I need to start thinking about whether there is a designer behind life in the universe. But it's not going to necessarily go further and tell you who the designer is. Yeah.
And is that then creationism, as we saying God is that creator?
Well,
is that designer? Is that creationism?
Creationism is a little bit different. Creationism certainly does go so far as to say who the creator is, who they think that the creator is. But creationism also starts with typically a particular interpretation of the Bible, okay? And you're trying to find evidence that, from science that fits with your particular interpretation of the Bible. I have no problem if people want to do that. If people want to try to say, look, I can find scientific evidence that supports my particular way of reading the Bible, okay, fine. Go ahead and do that. Intelligent design is different because it is starting with the data, with the scientific evidence, and it's asking, what can we learn from the scientific evidence alone? So I like intelligent design because it's a way that you can have sort of a common conversation with folks who may not already accept what the Bible says. When I go to my professors, when I was a student, back in my undergraduate days, most of them didn't believe that the Bible was the Word of God. Now, I am a Christian. I do believe the Bible is God's Word. But, if I want to talk to a friend or a professor who does not necessarily accept those presuppositions, then I need something that we can all have some in common to talk about. And that is where the scientific evidence is a good starting point. So we all agree that what we see in our cells is a language-based code that is an information-rich code in our DNA that is then being interpreted through, the machinery of our cells in a computer-like form of information processing. And then we all agree that the output of that information processing are these machine-like structures. We have machines in our cells, like one of them is called ATP synthase. and it basically functions like a rotary engine. If any of you are Mazda fans, the RX-7 or RX-8 that uses a rotary engine, well, we've got rotary engines inside of our cells that are spinning around, creating the energy molecule of your bodies called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And they're making, many times your weight in ATP every single day. Okay, so it's just amazing the amount of, energy that's being produced through this rotary engine inside of your cells constantly. As we're speaking right now, these things are spinning around, making energy. So these kinds of complex machines, that are encoded through this language-based code, computer-like programming inside your cell, none of this is coming about by chance. So I can talk to my atheistic friend and say, you know what? We all agree on the basics of molecular biology. You can read this in any molecular biology textbook. I'm not coming out of left field, when I'm saying these things right now. But what is the best explanation for it? So I find that when I talk to my friends who maybe don't have, a religious or a Christian worldview, that this is a much better way to talk to them and say, look, what is the best explanation for the complexity that we see in biology? Is it, a strictly unguided Darwinian process, which is what, you'll get from your mainstream science, when, you'll get from the local University of Pretoria. That's what they're going to tell you here. Or is it an intelligent cause? What is the best explanation? And the amazing thing, Janine, is when we look at the details of the scientific community, what are their explanations from a Darwinian perspective for how these molecular machines originate? You don't find explanations. They don't have good explanations for how these things originate. And so we're developing this alternative scientific theory, which we think is a better explanation.
Right. Our time is done, but I have to ask you one last question.
Yeah.
When I read my children's books at school, Darwinism is the normal. It's sold as truth. And there's nothing we can do about it. They've got to learn it. They've got to spew it. This is how. What's it going to take? I mean, this whole conference is about influence and about using your influence for change. You've got a lot of people agreeing with you on intelligent design, but it's still not the one that's taught in my kids' books at school. What's it going to take?
Well, it's going to take first getting educated. I think coming to this conference that we have this coming weekend would be a great place to start. You can also go to some of our websites. Our website for Discovery Institute, our intelligent design website is just intelligentdesign.org. That's intelligentdesign.org. You can find lots of resources, lots of great YouTube videos where we have, wonderful explanations that are fit for kids, high school level, even below. And also if you're a scientist or a student, academics, we have lots of resources for folks who are at a more technical level. So we've got resources for everybody. So I think the first place is just to get educated about this issue, and then we can start having the conversation about, are we really teaching students the full range of the scientific evidence? I have no problem teaching Darwinism, but is there more that students should also be learning?
Right. Get to it. Intelligentdesign.org. I'm going to post it on Facebook. This is already streaming, so under the comments, go check it out there. We're going to put it there so that you can get hold of it. Talk about it. Don't just accept truth in inverted commas. Find out what the truth is, and the truth will set you free.
My story, the one who shapes my path. You are the King of glory, who comforts with his staff.